Welcome to Deep Dive Down Under, a podcast that delves into inspiring stories from individuals with big hearts, bold visions, and profound purpose. Storytelling lies at the heart of human culture. For tens of thousands of years, Australian Indigenous communities, like many traditional cultures, have shared wisdom through stories. Long before written words, these stories taught children about their culture, environment, and law, passing down timeless lessons for generations to come. Each of us carries a story, a journey of growth, resilience, and inspiration. Within these journeys lie seeds of wisdom planted by mentors or nurtured through personal discovery, shaping the lives now led. Join us as we explore the world through the eyes of others. Their powerful stories invite us to expand our horizons, find inspiration, and connect more deeply with humanity. Whether you're seeking a spark of motivation or a moment of reflection, this podcast offers a space to listen, learn, and hear the whispers of your own soul. We take a moment to honour the traditional owners of the land we live on. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, acknowledging their wisdom and stewardship of this beautiful country.
So, welcome, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining today, and we've come to discuss the book recently finished.
Yes, The Truth Behind Motherhood.
But before we delve into the details of the book, if we could discuss a little bit about your childhood, discuss how it's all evolved.
All right, well, I suppose we can go right back to the beginning. So I was born in Cape Town in South Africa, so only as an adult now when I look back, really at the base of Table Mountain, which is a really strong energetic point, on planet Earth. I think it's one of the reasons why I was, incarnated there. So born in Cape Town, had a happy, safe, secure childhood, parents. I've got two brothers and all the rest. But I I was born, I'm 50 now, so 1974. So I very much spent my school days, my formative, school days, really as South Africa was coming to the end of apartheid. So there was, a lot of uprising and violence and all that type of thing. So as a young child, I guess what I witnessed in my experience is very different to potentially, perhaps growing up here in Australia or, other more sort of calmer places around the world. And because of apartheid, although I grew up in a big city that was very urbanized from a very young age, I was very aware of kind of the migrant workers that were coming into the city to work. And so I got an understanding at a very young age that actually in a lot of African communities, and not only African, because obviously then when I traveled, I've spent quite an extensive amount of time in Asia, I understood quite early on that there was a village raising children, which was very different to the urbanized experience of, growing up in a traditional home where, mum basically took care of you and everyone was in their little brick boxes and we would go to school and come home and then everyone was quite isolated. So I sort of started to understand quite young that there was a very different way of parenting, a very different way of mothering going on. Sadly, in a lot of African communities, they were coming out of the more rural villages into the cities for work. So that very much left grandparents to bring up the children. In a lot of African communities, you don't bring your own kids up, you bring your grandparents up because, the kids are going out to work to support the grandparents and the extended family as such. So it was curious and it was interesting to me that within my own upbringing, there was a whole different way of being going on around us. So I guess that was my first experience of something different to what I had experienced. And so then I obviously did all my schooling there. I did my, went on to university, did my human movement science, so my sports science. So very, very much involved in the body. I love anatomy. I love the body. That's always been my interest. So that was very much how I started my career, was from, I guess, just the very one-dimensional physical aspect of the body. And that was pretty much all I knew. I did do psychology as well as part of my degree. So I think probably deep down I chose it, although I didn't realize it at the time. But really that my skill set and my passion was going to develop into the mental and the emotional aspect of being human, I suppose. So that's very much the early days, I guess, in reference to the book, in terms of how I witnessed something very different. And then, of course, when I had my own mothering and parenting experience, I realized that the Western society has created a very isolating experience for parents. In the more traditional African, and as I say, when I experienced Asian villages and things, traveling, very community orientated. The kids were all together, just in the mud, dirt, building, creating, playing in nature. There was a sense of community around the adults. Grandparents would be sitting, there might be 5-10 of them all chatting away, kids all running around. New mums had elder wisdom, readily available. There wasn't a separation between different countries, or you needed to FaceTime your mum, or, Mum, what do I do now? It was readily available. The elder wisdom of the women who'd been through these experiences, I'm sure, I don't know personally, but looking back, could probably help and support maybe a new mum who was, struggling with particular aspect with the child, or even if it's just basic like the breastfeeding. There was an entire community support. Nobody had to go to any support group or go online, or, it was just... It was entrenched in society, and I hadn't appreciated the value of that until I had my own experience. So I guess, growing up where I did, what I witnessed, and then, as I say, I traveled quite extensively. So, seeing, having that reinforced in a lot of the more rural communities, And I guess, from the Western perspective, we would go around and experience these and be looking at thinking, they're poor, they're this, they're that, how lucky we are. But they're the lucky ones in many ways, because they may not have a lot in terms of financial resources, but they are culturally enriched, they're community enriched, they're very, very connected, which passes on to the next generation, socially, and with that then comes that automatic filtering in of the emotional support and the mental support. So, the book is very much around how do we create villages and support for quite isolated parents sometimes. I think that's part of the stress in the more Western society of having children. We're very, very isolated, and we're very, very busy.
Yeah.
Not only are we nurturing and taking care of life, but many are rushing back to work and trying to hold down jobs 3, 4, 5 days a week and do the nurturing and run a home. And, that's why the fall away of nutritious meals and, just downtime for kids and downtime for self-care, for us as women, it all just gets pushed to the periphery, because most people are just, they're on the hamster wheel and they're just like survival mode. So how do we bring society, but the book's focused, obviously. It's the same principles you can apply to anybody, kids or not or whatever. How do we allow society collectively to be able to take a breath?
Yeah.
And if society can take a breath, then we've got calm, emotionally stable parents. And as we were, discussing a little earlier off camera, very much the mother she sets the pulse for the home. I think your words were, they are the nervous system for the family. And I was like, yeah, they're the pulse. So, how do we educate particularly young mums that there is a different way? And if you're feeling overwhelmed, what kind of practical things can I actually do that's going to take me 5 minutes a day in my home? I don't need to go anywhere. I don't need to rely on anybody else. It's like, how do I tune back in? Because there's a massive disconnect. Yeah. What's the saying? The longest, I don't know. I'm probably messing it up, but it's something along the lines of, the longest journey you ever take is from your head to your heart. There's this huge disconnect. And I think as a society, we are, the pendulum has swung so far out the other way that, people have never been sicker. People have never been, we've got a mental health epidemic and crisis all around. We've got, disconnected kids who barely get out to nature, most of them because the parents are busy, just shoved behind a screen. And we've got this cascade of society coming through the generations, and so how do we kind of push the pause of where we are and allow society, including the young mums, an opportunity just to pause and take breaths. So so that's a snapshot, I guess, of where I came from and all the rest.
And when did you, what was your journey into the heart and your evolution of your soul and the connection of your soul mission and that deeper journey inwards? Did that start after you had the children, the learning of not just about the physical body anymore, but more of the spiritual and energetic body? Did that come after your children, or did it start a little bit before having the children?
Yeah, so what happened was, as I say,
with your career as well.
Yeah, so I started out I had a sports injury clinic. This is when I was still living in England. So I started that in 2000. So I opened the doors to my first clinic in the year 2000. And so obviously attracted very much sort of from the physical perspective, sore backs and necks and, very much, from the sort of sports injury, that kind of side of things. And many times people would come, 2-3 times, they'd be fixed and I wouldn't see them again. But there was a certain percentage of clients, let's say, for example, lower backache. No matter what you did, no matter whatever tools I applied, it didn't seem to make a difference. It didn't shift at all. And they would come back, well, there's no actual pathology. It's not like this disc or vertebral. There was no technical reason for this extreme amount of pain and all the rest. And so probably, after about 18 months or so, I started to think, I think there's something else going on in the body. I had no knowledge. I had no education. It was just a sense that there was something else that was going on. So that was the first time I started to think outside of my training, so to speak. So that was the first, I guess, sort of thread that came in. The second thread that came in was when my son was born. He must have been about 18 months old or so, give or take. And he got a cough. It was about October, November time. So this is obviously in England. So coming into winter, so it was autumn. And he just had this cough and cough and cough. And at first I thought, it's just probably like an infection. He's picked up childcare, that kind of thing. Anyway, it didn't get better. And after, I can't even remember the time period, but I'm guessing maybe sort of 4 or 6 weeks or so, I remember thinking, this cough is persistent. It's not going away. There's something else going on, a kid. So I remember I made an appointment at the doctor's and off I went and I took him to the GP. And the GP was, it's just a winter cold. These kids pick up all this kind of stuff. He said, it will sort itself out. wait for the immune system to strengthen. And he said, if you still got it in a month, come back. So I was like, okay, So off I went. And then, a month later, still had the cough. 2 months later, still had the cough. And I guess I knew something else was going on. But in those days, we haven't, now we've had the amazing explosion of natural therapies and things like that. There wasn't a lot of option of other places to go. And I'd heard of kinesiology somewhere along the line. I can't even remember how it came into my sphere, but I'd heard about kinesiology. I think probably because I was starting to research other aspects of taking care of my own clients. What else could be happening for these clients that I couldn't not fixed, but, they weren't healing themselves. And so kinesiology was in my sphere. I'd looked into doing some training. I hadn't quite decided, because obviously it's quite a big commitment and young kids and things like that. And anyway, my husband, through his work, ended up meeting a kinesiologist. So, of course, the universe provided, and this lady was literally put in front of him, and I'd been talking about kinesiology. So he came home from work and he was like, I've worked in a kinesiologist's house. So, and she said, go along with our son. And so that was it. So made an appointment, and this kid who'd had this persistent cough probably now for 5 or 6 months, we went in, she started to do some kinesiology, and literally within like 2 or 3 minutes, she said to me, this kid has done all the testing and all the rest, has a massive lactose intolerance. So get him off the dairy. And ironically, my husband has a lactose intolerance. So a lot of it, So anyway, so she said, lactose intolerance, and she said just be really mindful, particularly on sugar, for the next 4 weeks, just as we just let everything settle down. And she said that'll be the end of the cough. When I went home, we took him off dairy, because of course, at those ages, young kids, there were bottles before bed, they were having a lot, we were all told we should give them all their bottles and their dairy, and this is going back 20 odd years, And so we took him off the dairy, and I kid you not, within a week, I think it was about 5 or 6 or 7 days, this cough just went.
Amazing.
And I was like, I'm studying to be a kinesiologist. I literally signed up. I was like, I'm in, because I was on the fence, and that was obviously, and I was like, I want to be able to help, my family, but I want to be able to do this. This is the way in for me into the body. And so that was it. So I started to study my kinesiology. An amazing woman, Pauline Galvin, still one of my mentors, although I've obviously lost contact, and she was quite elderly at the time, to be fair. I'm not even sure if she's, still with us, but she was extremely formative in opening my sense of awareness to just the absolute miraculous nature of the body, the emotions, the mental side, the energetic connection, obviously the food, from a biochemical perspective, which we've just spoken about with my son. And so that was it. That was my journey. The deep dive began. My world completely changed for the better. It took me on a journey that I'm still evolving on. So that was very much the beginning. But then I started to study kinesiology, and then they kept talking about this triad of health, the physical, mental, emotional, and the energetic. And I was like, okay, what on earth is this? So because of my background and my training, I felt quite confident in the physical side of how I might approach someone. And then I was thinking, okay, well, what's this mental, emotional side? And I'm like, I'm talking about my own emotions. So I think we'll just leave that triad of health. We'll just park that one over in the corner. Let's focus more on the energetic and the biochemical side of things. So I'll just park one point of the triangle just over there, because I'm not ready. I was not able to express my emotions very well as a kid. And it was something that's taken me a long time to feel safe to have a voice, and a variety of different things. So parking the triad of health was very much an inside job. But, for many years, I did no further training on the mental and emotional. So so what happened with the kinesiology, I realized I needed to become an expert in each of those three. So from the energetic perspective, I had quite a few experiences traveling, one in particular in Australia that then put us on the path when we got back to England. People from like a meditation, energetic perspective really just fell into place. And when I was pregnant with my son, I went to a yoga class, and it was there that I met a man, and he took my husband and I under his wing. He's a descendant of a Shaolin monk. He had the lineage and the training. And so began our apprenticeship with him, and we still work with him to this day. But that opened my eyes from energy, dimensions, healing, just everything that comes around with the energetic side of the body and how we can get blocked energetically. I also, part of my energy education as well, I studied Jinsen-jutsu, which is an amazing Japanese healing technique. Mary Burmeister, you can look it up. There's a whole history there. I won't go into it today. But so it's just incredible. And there's some very basic practices that one can do to help shift and start to move energy in the body, and very much spoken about in the book. So between my teachings with Pete and the Jinsen-jutsu and my own experience as I developed into very much an energetic practitioner. We all have different skill sets in terms of energy. People can see auras, all sorts of different things. My skill set from an energetic perspective is that when I place my hands on a person, I can see where the blockage is, and then I can feel the emotion that's attached to the blockage. So I place my hands down, I'm directed, and I can tell you what's in there and what the blockage is. I also very much see the body as a hologram. When I'm working on people, I get a light body version of you. So I see a hologram. So from an energetic perspective, obviously this is developed over, 20 odd years. So that's how I work with the body energetically. And I was like, I still am not wanting to look at the mental emotional side, because I know if I do the training, guess what? You're the apprentice on the course. So it took me a long time to, I guess, actually say, pick up the courage to do it, because I knew for me, if I was ever going to be able to help other people, the first customer was myself. So that began. And it's actually tied into having my kids as well. I've really diverted. We were talking about having the kids, but anyway. So I one of the reasons for writing the book was, I've already mentioned the difficulty with my own experience. And a couple of years after my daughter was born, I really was literally at the point, I think, of like a breakdown. And so I reached out for help. That was the first time I reached out for help. And that was the first time that I felt supported, and this guy really got me out of crisis mode, and he showed me a different way of working with the body, and that was how our thoughts and beliefs and emotions impact us. The very popular book, The Body Keeps the Score. All right, so so that cracked me open, very vulnerable, very it was both difficult but also liberating to finally reach inside and be honest about my experiences and get the professional help that I needed. So that was of such immense value to me. I was like, okay, I've got this. I can go and do the training. So I've done a number of different courses and things, but essentially the main emotional mental techniques I use are EFT tapping. So I'm an advanced practitioner in that. I trained many years ago, I think 2013, 15, something like that. So I've been doing it for 10 plus years. And then once I delved into that, I was very aware how stress and trauma impacts the body and the stress loops and our fight, flight and our nervous system, and the role that our breath and the nervous system plays in our mental and emotional regulation. So off I went again. Told you it took me 15 years. I'm still learning. And then, became trauma informed and very much spent a lot of time around nervous system work. And then, of course, you can't do nervous system work without the breath work. And then off I went with the breath work. So that encompassed the sort of mental, emotional, and then the energetic side. And then, of course, part of the basic kinesiology training was the biochemical in terms of the food. We are what we eat, what we're putting in and the effect that has on the body. So that gave me a beautiful grounding of, the kind of a really broad looking at the human body. It was not just a bag of physical bones and muscles that were arriving for a treatment, which is essentially how I began my career. So, and then I guess, just finishing off from your original question, that's how come, not only from my own experiences of when my kids were young, but obviously over the years, I must have obviously attracted mums because, I've dealt with a lot of women in their early motherhood and parenting experience. So I was able to put the education into the mix, but also my personal experience and how I'd come out the other side. And so all that kind of blended into my approach in terms of the mind and the body and how everything's stored in the body. So, just the talk therapy, it works on it only gets so much of it. We need to get into the body where it's actually stored if we've any chance of being able to, what we call, close the stress loop. So if you want to talk about that, you can, but if not, fire away on your other questions.
No, I love it. I love everything that you've shared so far. It's been incredible. And if you want to talk about the stress loop, because, that's part of calming the nervous system down.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I think that's what this book is, the core of the book, isn't it? Is it? And what I've learnt through my own parenting journey, because I also had a breakdown after my second, and I had a good support system. Like, I think if it happened in the mainstream, if I was like mainstream, they would have put me on drugs. You know what I mean? For instance, but I knew I was aware of meditation and yoga and the strength of that. And then I went to a herbalist who gave me nourishing herbs to calm my nervous system down, and that actually allowed my nervous system for the yoga and meditation to maintain it.
Yeah, it created space for you to bring yourself down. Yes.
So it was because I was doing yoga and meditation every day, but it was like I needed to do it every day just to maintain.
Yes.
And then when I started taking the herbs, it was like, now
gave you a head start.
Yeah, it was like, now I feel like I've got a bit more nourishment, but so much of it is about the nervous system. So, and that's how I've evolved my career too, because through my own healing.
Absolutely. And I think
learning how to nourish my nervous system, I've started offering my services, like my holistic massage.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like after everything that I've learned, I'm nursing in emergency for 20 years, similar experiences working on the physical, and then realising this person keeps coming back with back pain. There's got to be something more
else.
emotional.
There's no pathology.
In emergency, the worst of the patients that you see, like, drug psychosis, and you can imagine. Just saying, I think the childhood trauma, you see it in their eyes. When these people are abusing you, I see their pain through their eyes, you know, and I'm like, there's so much more.
Eyes are the window to the soul.
Coming back to the nervous system, what I've learned in my career and my journey is, I feel like the nervous system is basically the foundation of health, because if your nervous system's not nourished, you make poor diet choices. Like you go, I'm just going to have the chips and the chocolate, and then you feel too overwhelmed to do the exercises that will help your body, or going for that walk, so I feel like it's the foundation.
Absolutely, it is. So,
if you want to talk about the stress cycle, or what you've learned about the nervous system and how because it's basically the core of this book.
It is. So essentially with the nervous system, our nervous system is the way that we, our body communicates and interact with our environment. So, for example, there's a very famous video, isn't there, of like in the African bush, there's like a lion chasing a gazelle like a buck, and it's chasing, and this buck's like literally running for its life, and it manages to get away from the lion, and then the lion goes off. And then what's next is you see the little buck, and it's literally shaking. And what's actually taking place in that moment is, and the animals are exactly the same with us. Obviously, fight, flight kicked in with that buck, there was an immediate threat, which is very natural, and we have that too. We need to be able to perceive danger. So we should have a nervous system that is operational, and then it kicks up a gear into hypervigilance, fight, flight. I need to get away from a fire, the buck from the lion, for example. But what you saw in that animal, once the threat was gone, animals are able to self-regulate their nervous system. So they're able to bring themselves out of that natural fight flight, which was very warranted and needed in the moment. And through the shaking and various other very basic ways, we can we can bring the nervous system back into balance. And so we see that all through the animal kingdom. The problem we have as humans, so this is the cycle. We have a threat, we go into fight, flight, so we get that natural increase in hypervigilance and all that. Then when the threat is removed, we should be able to deregulate so that we can bring our body back into a more natural, neutral state. And then we get on with daily life. And then maybe, another point, and off we go. The problem we have as humans is with our cortex, neocortex, and the frontal lobe and all the rest, is we get into fight, flight, and then we come down, the threat is gone, and we come down into the stress loop, and then we get stuck, because then it's all the thoughts and the beliefs and the emotions, and then we get in our own way. So what happens with us as humans, we are unable to complete the stress loop. So a lot of the anxiety, the overwhelm, even PTSD, all that, it's not the experience that's the issue. It's not the event. It's not the car accident or, whatever it is that happened to you. It's not the event. It's our nervous system's response to the event. So I don't mean to be disrespectful, but when I look at people from a client perspective, all I see are just hundreds of incomplete stress loops. So when I work, that's all I see from people. All right, so what happens with us, we get caught, our nervous system gets stuck in fight, flight. We do not know, we are not taught how to bring ourselves back into a regulated state. So we sit in fight, flight. All right, so now our amygdala, all parts of our brain and our nervous system is on high alert. So now we go out into the world and we are stuck in a fight, flight, hypervigilant, all the anxiety and things like that, because people are just walking around stuck in a fight, flight, nervous system. And so what happens is, obviously that feels very uncomfortable. It is our birthright. It is our physiological makeup to be able to have a nervous system that rises up when we need, but then it must be afforded the opportunity to come back to the neutral state. But we get stuck, and you can see it everywhere in society because it's not something we're taught.
Yeah,
we are not taught how to re-regulate ourselves. And so that's essentially a lot of the work that I do. One of the main components when you're working with stress, though, is because of the fight flight, to bring us back into that parasympathetic rest and digest state. The only way your nervous system can re-regulate is if we feel safe. So safety is the number one component of being able to bring the nervous system down. So that forms the basis of the stress and the trauma work that I do. The very first thing we do is we find a place of safety. So that could literally be within your own heart. It doesn't have to be, it could be a room in your house. It could be in the arms receiving a hug from, a safe person. I even had someone once before who chose the moon. Like the earth was just such a complex, traumatic place for her. The only place she really felt safe was actually not even on the planet. And that's fine. So you've got to operate from a place of safety. There is absolutely no way that you are able to re-regulate and bring a body out of fight, flight into a neutral state if the person doesn't feel safe. So that's the very, very first step of all. And it doesn't even have to be major traumas. We all have traumas from all over the show. It doesn't even have to be like a massive, something major. And so that's the basis of it. And then, of course, you need to be able to, touch on the car accident, and then you can go to the origin. You've got to get to the origin, and here comes your inner child work, and here comes all the modalities that I've put together. We will then go back to the origin. What's the underlying emotion, the memory, what's the thought, what's the spark that has held this in place? And it could be something, from a childhood, For years, I had the overarching belief I had about myself was you are not good enough. I approached everything from that perspective. I had a deep-seated sense that I was not good enough for everything that I approached or tried. It was like, you don't deserve to be the best. It was extremely strong. And when I was introduced to this work and I was taken back, the memory that I was taken back to, I was about 7. I was in my second year of primary school, and I was in the kids' choir. And I'm a terrible singer. And I was in the kids' choir, and then the choir teacher, whatever you want to call her, she said, the whole choir was there. There's probably about 100 kids. And then she arrived in the hall and she said, oh, we're going to let a few of you go. Because obviously I'm really bad at singing. So anyway, so what she said, so she called out my name, and then so she said, so I'm going to ask you to leave. So I then had to get up out of my chair. The school hall had like wooden floor, so every step you took, you could hear the footsteps. And I can just remember walking, and all I could hear was like this reverberation on these, like the clunking of my shoes. So I was so embarrassed, obviously being chucked out, So then, of course, what happened, I went back to my classroom, and as I opened the door, my teacher said to me, oh, what are you doing back? I thought you were at choir practice. So in front of the whole class, I then had to admit, I was only 7, in front of the whole class admit that basically I've just been chucked out of the choir and I've been sent back to class. Aww. So what happens is when we have these experiences, I'm only really explaining it in the sense that what happens when we have these experiences, there's different terms for it, orphan parts, or parts of us kind of fragment off. So that then subconsciously, I had no idea. I had no idea I was storing it. That was then when I figured in therapy years later, the beginning of this origin of I'm not good enough. And so many of all my life decisions had been made from that adapted disadvantage position. And then once I cleared that and realized that my self-worth is not connected to the fact that I'm a really bad singer, that I actually have a lot of other qualities and skills to offer. It is not singing, but I have others. I was able to really do that healing, but it was so interesting that I'd had the filters for decades of I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. So the only reason I've really shared that is so that is what was required for me to close the stress loop of the shame and the embarrassment of being chucked out, and then the I'm not good enough. So that was how it's just basically an example of how I was able to close that stress loop. So that's essentially what we do. So as I say, it wasn't the chucking out of the choir, it wasn't the event, it was how my mind got in the way of I'm not good enough. Our human, because we're more evolved than animals, our human thoughts and emotions and all that was it not enabling that stress loop to complete? And so this is it. And so we get stuck in fight flight. Just to conclude talking about stress cycle. So we get stuck in fight flight. Well, you imagine operating from that, everything you approach is from a hyper anxious kind of perspective. So the world becomes very unsafe, very unthreatening, very threatening, very overwhelming. Even small tasks are just huge. Why? Because you're working from up here. Your nervous system should be perceiving them from here because it isn't really a threat to drive to the shops to go and do your weekly shop. But for somebody who's maybe had a car accident or had an experience along those lines, that is a huge threat to their nervous system. So daily tasks become overwhelming. And this is why with all, with addictions and all that, so what happens is you're now living life in a hyper aroused state, and especially if you've come from a lot of trauma in your childhood, for sometimes 10, 15, 20 years you have lived in a hypervigilant state, and it is particularly damaging for children because when you're young you can't take care of yourself, so you are dependent on your parents for survival. So it becomes this really paradoxical relationship. It's like I can't really cope physically, emotionally, mentally with what's going on in the home, but I'm age 5, I can't leave. So it becomes, this is how it gets entrenched. And then we send adults into the world and they are just, their nervous systems are just shot to pieces because they have been stuck in this hyper aroused state because at no point have their bodies been afforded an opportunity to settle because the threat of violence in the home or whatever it is has always been present. So you can see, so this is how they go into adult life. And now we want them to take full-time jobs and become parents themselves and all that type of thing. So it's very, very important we understand that. So so of course then what happens is life is tough. Life is tough when you are approaching it from a hypervigilant state. And so there come the addiction. So then I'm going to drink to settle myself when I come home from work, or I'm going to emotionally eat and I'm going to take that chocolate bar because that is how I am going to self-soothe, so it becomes, so people, so anyone with addictions, really the first question is, well, what's happened to you? Yeah. What are you trying to numb? Why are you self-soothing with whatever it may be, drugs, alcohol, sex, all sorts, it's what's happened, and you go back to the origin, because if you can bring that body out of the hyper-aroused state, the need for that self-soothing, it's just not required anymore because the body can approach it from a calmer, regulated state where smaller things are not perceived as dangers. So that's kind of an overarching kind of broad explanation of trauma and all the work. So that's really important. And as you say, and that very much forms the basis and the core of my book, because I'm very, anyone who's been pregnant and had early kids with the sleep deprivation, and it's a huge assault on the nervous system. I had 2 very easy births, but I'm also very aware that there are millions of women on the planet who actually had very traumatic experience birthing their children, and huge amount of fear, especially if it was your first child, really into the unknown. And there are a lot of women who are traumatized from their birth experience. So then we send them home, and then they are required to take care of this tiny baby that's not sleeping, feeding and just all the demands of that. And so we send them home to their little house where they're isolated in a little brick box, and maybe husband goes off to work and they're at home with the baby. With no way to be able to process maybe some of their experiences, maybe things are different now. I mean, I had my kids in the early 2000s, 2002 and 2006. So, but certainly there's very little support, and there's still very little education on how, when you're taking care of a young child or you're pregnant, maybe you've got anxiety then around, actually giving birth, because all we hear as mothers are the trauma stories.
Yeah.
The only women that really talk are the ones that want to tell you about their traumatic experience. But there are actually millions of us who were able to move through that labor process and birth babies without the trauma. But as a woman, there is so much fear around giving birth. It's undeniably painful. It is not the best day you're going to have. I mean, I'm not denying it, been there, done that. But the point is, I think as a society, there is so much fear as women, rather than it being this birthing, really empowering process and the miraculous nature of who we are as females and our bodies. And we are miracles. We make life, we grow life, we birth life. We are the most miraculous creatures on earth, you know, the feminine species. But there's not a lot of conversation, certainly not in the West. So I wanted with this book to be able to bridge some of that, be able to open the door and open the conversation, perhaps for mums or pregnant people who are struggling or anxious maybe about giving birth, you know, things like that. In my work, I know I have worked with a number of mums who've only had one kid. They would have liked more, but they're so traumatized by the first birth experience that they're like, ain't going there. Rather than, let's scoop these women up. Let's give them the compassion, the support, the love they need. Let's help them process it.
Yeah.
So that they can now step forward into their motherhood journey in a more empowered way, rather than on the back foot of kind of always coming from that trauma perspective. I know, a lot of women I've worked with, and some of them have gone on then to have other children, but for some, sadly, you know, I've met them, you know, when the kids are in their 20s, 30, you know, way past childbearing ages, in the sense that their family stopped with one kid, but they've always had yearning for more, but it was just, they just couldn't go there. So it's...
So you hope to inspire women to break the cycle, so then they can fulfill their heart's desires, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Because if your heart and soul is yearning another child, you know, so you've got siblings, you know, because it is parenting is harder if it's just one child in many ways too, because they're going to be reliant on you for that imagination play, for the company. So when you have two, at least two children, they're going to fight.
Yes. And that's all part of the learning, isn't it, though? That's very much part of the learning, and how you deal with conflict resolution. Yes. How do you communicate? You know, all of that is important growth for children. I mean, it drives us nuts as parents, but, you know, the bickering and all the rest. But these are all important skills that are being learned along the way. So, so maybe that's one aspect of the book, but very much... I want to. The book is a support resource, no matter what stage you are on in your motherhood journey. Conception, before you've even begun, you know.
There's another story. Infertility.
So you know, so there's I touch on that, you know, and then we look at pregnancy and you know, the morning sickness and all the things that you put up with that, you know, and then obviously preparing for birth. There's a whole chapter on how to prepare for a calm birth experience, and then we touch on, you know, life with a newborn when you come home from hospital, you know, just coping with the sleep deprivation and, you know, the actual physical recovery from giving birth. You know, when we were born and in generations before, you know, mothers stayed in hospital for a week, because part of it was rest. Yeah. Yes, you can go home earlier, but the moment you step out of hospital, what's happening? You're cooking, you're cleaning, you know, whatever it is, or if you've got other kids at home, and you're just back on this hamster wheel, as if giving birth was just like this minor little blip, and off you go. I gave birth to my daughter at 2:30 in the morning, and it was textbook. It was very easy. In fact, she was nearly born in the car. That's a whole nother story. But the point was, it was very quick, and it was over. And she was probably about 2 hours old. It was 4:30 in the morning, and they said, "Oh, do you want to go home?"
Oh my God.
Like my son was asleep, I'm going to pop home and, overnight mum's just popped on a baby and we're home. Shall I take you to daycare? They literally said she was about 2 hours, so she had all her checks and she was feeding and all the rest. And they said, would you like to go home? And I was like, I think I just need a moment. I eventually went home. It was that day. Like, I don't know, It was in the afternoon. It was later on in the afternoon. Eventually, my husband came with our son and they met and all the rest. So, it was literally, would you want to go home? And I was like, can I just have I'd just been through this, although it was extremely quick. That was also part of the trauma. I thought she was about it. I just made it to hospital. So there was also that big fear and anxiety in terms of that experience. Although it was an easy birth, that was like, you try to hold a baby when it's coming out in a car. It's pretty, like nature's taking over. So, so we just get sent home as if like birth is just this tiny little event and just pick up where you left off. I remember when we got home, I said to my husband, I'm literally just going to lay in bed for 2 days. My body just needs time to, repair and, mentally, emotionally. We've had an extremely difficult journey to having my second one in my arms. So I was just like, I've done it. It was extremely traumatic getting her here, shall we say, from conception and all the rest. So
and conception, like, society's pressure. Oh, why haven't you had a child yet? And then, or, do you have children? That it's such a some friends that have chosen, or it just hasn't happened to have children. That's a whole trauma in itself. Or they might have been trying for 8 years, and
absolutely.
Everyone, like, that's like the small talk in our society that we.
As soon as you're married or in a long-term relationship, partnership, buy a house, I got married, what's the very first thing that everyone starts asking? Well, you're going to have kids, you're going to have kids. So, so that's also part of the book, is having boundaries. I'm very clear on that. Limit, especially if you're struggling to conceive. Choose who you socialize with. Have firm boundaries in place. If Granny keeps saying to you, why aren't you pregnant? When's my grandchild coming? Say, actually, you need to have boundaries with people. And limit those kind of conversations that are very stressful. So, all of this forms part of the book. And, I said about in terms of the conversation regarding stress and conception, I spoke about really reaching almost like a breakdown point where I eventually went and sought out therapy, and so much of it was the time period between having my son and then obviously then falling pregnant with my daughter. And I had a number of experiences occur that I literally just glossed over and brushed over, and I didn't pause, and I did not give myself the time physically to heal. And I certainly, that was still when I wasn't like, I wasn't able to go there emotionally and mentally. And so that formed a huge part of my healing. So, really encourage people, when you are going through events in your life, it's so important at the time to get that emotional and mental support so that you can work through, so that these events can be completed, because it was an extremely challenging, I would say it was probably the most stressful 2 years of my life, that window between, on my, because with my son, in terms of conception, he was very eager to get here. Came off the pill, and years earlier, I'd had a cyst or something on one of my ovaries, fallopian tubes, and they had said to me, if you ever decide to have kids, be patient, because you've probably only got one side working, so be patient. Don't think around infertility, just take your time. So don't make it stressful. So I was like, okay. So came up the pill, and I said to myself, well, we'll just give it a year. We were in no rush, and all the rest. 6 weeks. I was like, wow. Okay. So so it was almost too quick. I was like, I've got myself another year of this, not being a parent. So from a conception perspective, it was easy peasy. So then obviously a pregnancy, and had him. Beautiful water birth, did hypnobirthing before hypnobirthing was even a thing. I had to go to a hypnotist. She made up these little tapes and things for me. So, because I wanted a natural birth, and I had a very empowering, positive water birth experience. So it was lovely. So I was like, oh, I can do this. I can do this pregnancy kind of thing. It's all quite nice and easy. And then on our son's first birthday, about a week before we'd gone on holiday up to the Lake District in the UK, and I'd suddenly become really unwell with like a really deep like abdominal pain, and it was really weird. And I thought, well, maybe I'd eaten something weird on holiday or something, and all the rest. Anyway, we came back home to where we were living in England, and it kind of continued. And on my son's first birthday, Steve had come home so we could have lunch with our son, and we had a little cake, and it was his first birthday and all the rest. And then he went down to have a sleep. And so I said, Steve, well, while you're here, in the morning I'd made a doctor's appointment. I said, well, I better just go get myself checked out. So he stayed while, our son was asleep. So I went off to the doctor's. And anyway, they did a pregnancy test, and the faint lines came up, and she was like, you've got an ectopic pregnancy. She said, you're not going home, you're going straight to hospital, because obviously they've been putting pressure for some time. And I mean, everyone swung into gear. They phoned, the obs-gynae ward, and it, like the red carpet was rolled out. I hadn't realized how dangerous they could obviously be. So I went in there, and that was the end of my son's first birthday. I didn't go home. We had all grandparents and stuff arriving. Anyway, so I was in hospital, and so then you could either physically have the tube removed, or they give you methotrexate, which is like a chemotherapy-based drug. I didn't realize this at the time. And so I thought, well, I wanted more kids. It was on the opposite one to where I'd had the original operation. So I was obviously concerned if they'd taken that tube out, that would potentially leave me infertile. So I opted for the methotrexate. All right. So, and then that obviously terminated, I guess, the pregnancy and all the rest. So, so that was the end of that journey. And then they said to me, well, wait a minimum of 3 months, for the drug, for the system to, just to make sure it's safe. And anyway, about 6 months later, I then fell pregnant, and we were going to South Africa on holiday. So we used to go once a year from England. It was my condition for living in England that I could escape in the winter. So we used to go for 3 weeks at Christmas and early January every year. We did it for years, in fact, until we moved to Australia. And very early stages of pregnancy, and then we went to South Africa on holiday. I think I found out I was pregnant about literally a day or two before we left. Anyway, so we went on holiday. And a couple of weeks into the holiday, I had a miscarriage. So I was on holiday and all the rest. Anyway, so obviously admitted into hospital, and they obviously, managed things there. Did have to have an anesthetic and all the rest. So I then came home that afternoon. So I went in the morning. I came home that afternoon. Bizarrely, it was in the hospital where I was born. I mean, talk about that for full circle. In Cape Town. It was the same hospital I was born. And then went home. And the very next day, one of my best friends was having a baby shower for her first baby. And I went to a baby shower. Within 24 hours, I just carried on. All around young babies. She was all the excitement about the pregnancy, and the day before I just lost this second baby. I mean, I was like a machine. I just was like, it's too painful. It's just too painful to absorb what's just happened. So I'm just going to and because it was very early on in pregnancy, obviously, we hadn't told a lot of people. So I went to this, I look back now, and I just sat at this baby shower. Oh, congratulations, and babies everywhere. The very next day, and so then when we got back to England, it was the weirdest feeling. I still felt pregnant. It was the weirdest feeling. I just felt, I still had that low grade nausea. It was just, I said to my husband, I said, Steve, I know this sounds weird, but I said, I still feel pregnant. And he was like, well, you can't be. And anyway, we'd been back about 2 weeks, and I was like, I'm going to go to the doctor. And I arrived and I said, I know you're going to think I am completely bonkers, but I feel pregnant. And they were like, all right, well, give you a pregnancy. I did the pregnancy test and the line came up and they were like, what's going on here? And basically, when I'd had the procedure back in South Africa, they hadn't taken the entire placenta out. And so they'd left me with a portion of my placenta. So my body was still thinking that's why I still felt pregnant. So then I had to have another operation.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so all this was within a few weeks of each other. Just lost a second baby, carried on my holiday, then went up the coast with family and all the rest, came back. I then had this whole experience. Then, of course, had this day surgery. And guess what? Sent home. Well, we've taken care of the physical side. Just go on and get on with your life. So in 6 months or so, I'd had ectopic, I'd had miscarriage on holiday, and come back and so I'm only, again, expressing this because this is what happens. We have these big events. There was no, I was, when I look back, I was, they talk about fight, flight, and freeze. I was just frozen. It wasn't even a fight. It wasn't even a flight. I look back for those couple of years and I was just in a frozen nervous system state. It was just like, I can remember life just seemed to be going on kind of around me. I was just frozen. It was just like my body was like, okay, this is like a bit too big. So we're just going to just freeze, like no more of this.
Yeah, one of my friends...
Yeah, and these experiences occur.
Yeah, one of my friends nearly died. Yeah. She went to women's and children's in the waiting room, blood everywhere on the floor. And then, basically the next day, out you go. Or she became hypotensive emergency surgery and everything. And I don't know if it was the next day, actually, but soon after. But she's a very holistic woman, so she's like, I'm just going to stay at my brother's for I think she stayed at her brother's because she's got 2 kids at home. She's like, I'm just going to stay here to recover and emotionally reset. But she's like, imagine these young women that don't understand
I had no understanding of it,
or like how to
exactly.
She was so concerned, like it just pushed out the door and then no emotional recovery. But she at least allowed herself that emotional recovery by saying, I need some time on my own, and just hibernating at her brother's.
Exactly. And there's the education. And that's very much, it's all about education, this book, about how do we step into self-care? What does that look like for you on your pregnancy or early motherhood journey, Because at the end of the day, if the tank's empty, you've got nothing to give. Again, there's that analogy with the full teacup, it needs to be overflowing onto the saucer. We give from the saucer.
Yeah.
You don't give from your teacup.
Yeah.
And, your teacup's empty and there's no tea in the teacup. You've got nothing to give. So it's basically this book is, this book obviously focuses on motherhood and pregnancy, but really these principles can be adapted to society at a wider scale. How do we actually say to people, here are 15 ways, very easily, I can show you can do at home, anytime, anywhere, that you can fill your teacup up with. And then when your teacup starts to overflow onto the saucer, that's where we give. Yeah. We give to our kids and our spouses and our workplaces and parents, whatever it is, our friends. We give from the saucer, but most of us are just trying to give from a teacup that's got very little in, So it's all about filling up the cup. We've all heard of filling up the cup, filling up the cup, filling up the cup. So as a society, we need to get back to that. And part of filling up the cup is understanding, what are the stresses and the traumas and things that are making my cup continuously just be empty. So and so like you're saying with your friend, and very much my experience, you just get turfed out. And not only our two, this is why the book is here. Millions of women have these experiences, miscarriages. I don't know the exact statistics, but millions of women have them, and we don't really talk about it. I didn't really talk about even to other mums and things. There were a few close friends I expressed to, but I don't know, they just, why is there not more of a conversation around this, you know? And then I think because my body had been through so much, 2 big operations and the ectopic pregnancy is a third thing, all in a few months. It then took 18 months of trying to conceive. And of course, with each month going by, you know, all the stress and all building up the pressure, and the gap between, you know, was getting bigger. And I didn't really want a huge gap, you know, between the 2 kids. It wasn't like we were going to try for 10 years, you know. And so there was like this pressure. And of course, I had no idea at that point, still just studying my kinesiology training around the emotional impact on the physical body, and how not only my experiences, but then all the pressure of trying to conceive in a frozen nervous system state. And then I'm like, well, why isn't this happening?
Yeah.
And then this class is infertility. No, I needed nurturing and emotional support so that I could process what I'd gone through. Nervous system comes back to a more regulated state. And then, of course, far more inviting and productive environment for conception. And so, you know, so much of all this infertility is like, it's mostly emotional work. Obviously, we've got physical. I'm not discounting, you know, physical issues, and hormonal issues and things, but for a lot of people, you know, and then
the little soul is waiting.
And this little soul is waiting.
But they might be like, you're not quite ready yet.
Yeah, I ain't gestating in that soup of stress. I'm like, I'm hanging back till mama gets herself sorted. I ain't coming into a nervous system. You know, you imagine now we're gestating children. That's what I always do think. She was hanging back thinking, I ain't coming in that womb. When our son was 3, I always said to Steve, when our son gets to 3, we're stopping. It had just been such a stressful 2 years. I was like, we can't keep living in this environment of trying and all the rest. So we moved house literally within a few weeks of him turning 3. And so we decided that if I wasn't pregnant by the time we left the house, we were going to move to a new house, fresh start, and we were just going to accept that this was our family. The 3 of us would go on. And then just before the sale of our house, England has the most awful way of selling houses. People can pull out on the day your house is packed and everything's done and people pull out. It's an extremely stressful situation. And about 2 weeks before we were about to move, the people whose house we were moving into, he wasn't a very nice man, he said, oh no, we're just going to go on holiday, so we're just going to push the sale back. But the people buying our house, you know, coming up from underneath, she was heavily pregnant, and I'd actually worked with her, so I knew her. It was really bizarre. And so she wanted to move in like a week before her due date. She had 2 other kids. I said to Steve, we can't let her down. She might also pull out the sale, you know. So we moved out of our house so she could move in, and we went and stayed in a holiday village locally for a month while this other person went on holiday. We've moved out the house, and I said to Steve, that's it. We've got our family of 3. We've got a new beginning in our new home. And I said, let's just put this behind us and get on with our life. Moved into the new house, and guess what? The month in the holiday village where I had finally said, I'm done, gave my body a moment to breathe, it created an environment. And so I moved in, and I was like, holy cow. So, you know, and then obviously, and that was it. So it took really 2 years of a lot of ups and downs and real emotional trauma to get to the point. So so that just really, you know, again, I mentioned that because you were saying about the body and the nervous system and its impact on conception. And there is an example right there for you. After like 18 months of trying, the moment I said, now we're done, like, this is it, took all the pressure off. My body was able to just breathe. Nervous system was able to just go, no more trying. I mentioned my daughter was probably like, okay, now I'm happy to go. Now I'm happy to gestate in that womb. She looks a lot better in there now. And that was it. And then, you know, and so then obviously 9 months later, she arrived.
And you took a breath.
I took a breath.
On your holiday.
I breathed into my body.
Did you still need to work on your holiday?
Yes, we were working. No, we were kind of, we were, but it was fine.
But I guess it was just a new, like you still would have felt like you were on a holiday.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was like this little, they had like little wood cabins in the woods, and they had a swimming pool and stuff, so we could take our son swimming every day. So yeah, we were still working as such, but you know, on the days that we weren't working and weekends, it was like we were on like this little holiday. Yeah, it was like.
So you took a breath.
Yeah, I decided we were stopping trying, and this was our little family of 3, and as much as I wanted another one, we weren't going to continue living under this kind of, you know, the mindset of all this pressure. So yeah, so, you know, very much so. The point is, I had to wait to give up. I want to provide, I mean, really in the introduction to the book, I very clearly state, I have written the book I wish I had. If I had had access to how I could do my breath work, how I could calm my vagus nerve, sort through my emotions mentally, you know, and emotionally regarding all I had gone through, you know, done my energy work with the Jinsen Jitsu, it could have been a completely different 2-year experience. So I want to make people aware that these tools are very available. So I've popped them in a book, and hopefully the intention is for it to go global, so women all over the world know that they are seen and that they are supported at what can be quite a tricky time in life. So yeah, that's very much the intention of the book.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing so much about the background of the book and your own personal experiences. It's been a really interesting story, and, you know, really gives an understanding of your perspective on how you know, your own personal experiences. You can see and hold your clients, and you can feel it in the book, how much passion you have to help other people.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that it has come across, because you write it, but, you know, it now needs to be received. So thank you.
Just to, you know, this deep passion to help others so they don't have to do this journey on their own. Absolutely. And I just wanted to touch now onto a little bit of a different aspect of the book, because we both know each other through our mutual friend Dawn.
Yes.
The little spiritual hub that she's created.
Yes, indeed.
And you've got an interesting story related to the book, how you're at one of Dawn's meditations and you discovered that this book was wanting to be birthed.
So a number of years ago, I had a reading, and it was actually an astrology reading. And who's someone I'd met at Dawn's, and I'd gone for this astrology reading, and she said to me, "Oh, you're going to write a book. You're going to write a book." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to write a book. No, I'm not going to write a book." She's like, "No, you're going to write a book. You're going to write a book." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to write a book." And anyway, so on we went. This is a few years ago. And then, as you know, previously explained, and like we've met, you know, Dawn with meditation, so very much I still do, you know, obviously all my deep energetic work, both at home and when I go to Dawn's. And we had gone there just for one normal evening, just going to drop into my normal meditation. And it was within the meditation that this book was channeled to me. So when I came out of the meditation, normally we're all like quite dozy and drowsy, aren't we? And Dawn will go around, "What was your experience?" And we all half in, half out. I came out, I was like wide. I was like, "Do you have a piece of like pen and paper?" She was like, "Yeah, I'll go get you one." And she put this pen and paper into my hand, and I just started writing. And for about the next 20 minutes, basically the bones of the book was channeled through. So by the time I went home that evening, I literally had the outline, all the different modalities. They're going like, "You need to do this, you need to do that, and I was just scribbling. I've still got the pages of A4s in my drawer at home. So this book feels like a divine gift for humanity. I know that might sound all a bit weird and all the rest, but I very much, it is a gift to humanity. Perhaps from a universal perspective, they can see that the pendulum has swung so far in the sense that we live in a very individualistic society, very individualistic communities where we all, you know, want the best for ourselves. And in many workplaces, there's things that's okay to trample all over people, you know. We all come home very isolated in our little homes. There's not a lot of community. For many people, especially with housing getting more and more expensive, a lot of people are going into smaller homes with not even proper gardens and apartment living and things. So everyone is just very, very isolated. Life is busy, life is stressful, everyone's on the hamster wheel. And so it doesn't really provide the right environment for heart-centered, community-based living. And I think the pendulum's gone so far. We only have to look around at how ill people are, and as we were saying earlier, the mental health epidemic, to realize that we need a change. And this is very much part of the change. It's come in. It is my belief that when we are all incarnated, that we come in with specific soul missions or purposes, things that we either need, it's our mission to accomplish, we come in, we're incarnated, we have had a soul that has many lifetimes, and then we choose to come to Earth, maybe repeatedly or maybe the first time, and we basically are given a little Earth suit that has bones and ligaments and muscles and nervous systems and digestive tract and teeth and things. So we kind of incarnate into a little Earth suit, and then we go about living a human experience. But part of that soul mission is we come either to maybe experience something. It doesn't mean it has to be really positive, sadly, for some souls, or we have a soul mission. And very much it only became apparent to me maybe 3 or 4 years ago, so fairly recently, through my, through the work that I do and the connection that I have, that very much my soul mission, my soul purpose for this incarnation, in terms of what I'm here, the service I'm here to provide for community, is I'm here as a very grounding presence. So what does that mean? It means, particularly now, we've got huge rise in frequency on the planet. So from, Mother Earth is a living being. She has her own frequency. Everything is frequency. Everything vibrates. It's like even the solid chair we're sitting at, it is still vibrating. Everything has a frequency and everything's vibrating. And so Mother Earth is a frequency and she vibrates. We do, all the sentient beings and the plants and the animals, everything is just oscillating and it's beautiful. And but what's happening at the moment, we're getting a lot of light codes, a lot of sun codes, we're getting a lot of crystalline activation of DNA. We're going from a very organic DNA into a more crystalline. Our bodies are changing. Mother Earth is changing. Look up the Schumann resonance if you would like to find out more about that, the frequency at which Mother Earth is operating. So what does that mean for us as a society living here on planet Earth? And, how does that connect to my soul mission? Well, I guess what's happening as frequency is rising, a lot of people who are still operating on a very low level with all the old constructs of the old, education system, healthcare system, political systems, societal systems, cultural systems, religious systems, you name it, we're all programmed. We all get absolutely filled with beliefs and thoughts from everybody. By the time we become adults, we are so disconnected from who we are because we've been through all these different programs and systems, and then we come into adulthood and we're like operating from a point of view that's not inherently ours.
Yeah.
All right. And there's the adaptation and everything we've spoken about. So from a grounding perspective, from a soul mission perspective, what's happening is we're seeing huge change in the frequency. So what's happening in terms of the children that are now being born, they're being incarnated and born into the space which is resonating at a higher frequency. So they're coming in at a different level. Our generation and generations before, we came in at a lower level. So we operate in a different parameter. We have a different mode of operation with different, as I say, thoughts and beliefs and programming and all the rest. But what's happening with the little crystalline kids and the indigo kids that have been coming through the last 20, 25 years or, however, probably longer, actually, probably 80s, 90s. They're coming in at a different frequency. But what happens is we've got kids coming in at a high frequency that are being parented by parents at a lower frequency. So it's very much my mission is to how do we not only educate the parents to recognize the kids, because it requires a different kind of parenting. But how do we educate parents to not stifle and stamp it out? Because for many parents, they can't recognize it. So what happens is the first 7 years of life, we're still very, from an energetic perspective, we're umbilically attached to our mothers. So there's an umbilical, obviously not physical connection. And so we get this, they're coming in on this frequency, and then through parenting and all sorts of other, aspects, what happens is by the time they're about 7, their frequencies, basically the lights are turned off, their frequency is diminished. And these kids, let's say they circle kids, and we're trying to fit them into a very ill, messed up square society, and it's like, why aren't these circle kids fitting into the square society?
Yeah.
What we should be thinking is, how do we raise our vibration? Because let's go and join these kids, because they are operating at and it's not superior, it's just at a different level. So I'm here not only to ground in the frequency of the children. My role, hence the channeled book, is we need to educate kids. Like, high frequency kids ideally need high frequency parents. So you can recognize the gifts, because change is afoot. With the rising frequency, we're going to have a collapse of all the constructs that we are currently, and we're seeing it play out before our eyes, politically, economically, financial systems, education, homeschooling is just exploding, because no longer the kids just aren't, they're bored. They're not being stimulated at the frequency at which we need to meet them. We need to be able to meet them in a completely different way. And, the other thing I think a lot of people forget, this new generation coming through, and those that have been coming through the last sort of 20, 25 years, they're going to be our new leaders. They're going to take us into, the golden future, so to speak, that people speak about. So, we mustn't dim their lights. We need them. We need them. We need them to hold the frequency so this change can come in. But they just keep getting knocked off their perches by parents who don't even understand what I'm talking about. And there's no judgment in that. There's zero judgment in that comment, It's just that we just need to be able to, we need to keep their lights on, because they're our future. And, we don't really want to continue down this road of all the war and the destruction and the greed and the sickness. I mean, just everything that we look at, we are not living how we should, we look, right back to the beginning, the villages and we need to be community based, where we can rely on people, have support, feel nurtured, feel seen, feel appreciated, because we all bring different skills into the mix. I'm a terrible gardener. I really could do with somebody helping me grow my veggie patch. But in exchange, if you're unwell, come and see me, and then I can maybe help with your healing, So it's this exchange where we all are working to our strengths. It's like, again, what's the saying? We are greater than what's the saying? The sum is greater than the parts, rather than us all trying to do everything in our little homes, work, raise kids, run our home, sort out all our own stuff, grow veggies. And, it's exhausting. It's not sustainable, and society is showing us, we've just got people, it's a mess. So, that's my mission, is to help ground the frequency of these new kids. But very much they're like, well, we need to go back a step. Hence the book. It's an account. And I think, looking back, this is also what came to me, is why I did have those tricky few years, because if I hadn't had those experiences, I would have no understanding really of, how much support is required at this mass. I mean, becoming a parent is the biggest transition leap that we take in a lifetime. It changes everything from that moment on, And so, grounding the kids, but now we need to not only I do a lot of grid work in the earth. I do a lot of grid work and things like that behind the scenes, but we now need to raise the parents up. So it's like twofold: personal experience versus grounding in the new energy, which is, why the book is here. And so I've written the book. There are a lot of sequences and processes within the book itself, but some of, maybe we can talk a bit about the EFT and just a couple of, just touch on it lightly. But a lot of the sequences, sometimes I have appreciated that it might be quite nice, rather than reading out of the book while you're doing it, is to be able to maybe just put some headphones in or push play and have an audio version. So I can take you through the sequences, take you through the tapping without having, I think it provides a really nice scenario. If you do, a lot of people like the reading. Some people are very visual, so they would prefer the book. But for my auditory, people who want to connect in, maybe listening would create a nice experience for them too. So I have recorded an audio course. I've basically read out the book. It's based on the book, and I take you through every single sequence in the book. And so I've put it together. It has been a bit enough more than I could chew, to be fair. It's been a huge labor of love. It's taken me a lot longer than I anticipated. But in the world of AI, I was like, this cannot have anything like that attached to it, because it is heart-centered. So I've done all the recording, very poor at editing, I've discovered. So it's a new skill, so all new skills. So that is going to be available, and that will be on my website. And we discussed before, leave all the details for social media, and wendy-turner.com for the website. And so you find access to the book, which you can buy on Amazon, or obviously you can just purchase the audio course from the website. So, so I think they'll blend beautifully together.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's really 3 real core practices in the book that you describe. So there's lots of different techniques, but there's 3 main ones that we thought would be brilliant for you to share.
Yeah.
So you get that visual, physical visual example, and then, when you have the book, then you have a bit of an awareness already of these different techniques. And what I picked up the book 2 days ago, rereading it, preparing for the interview, and I was like, oh yes, I remember now I'm doing this, because I was having a bit of trouble sleeping, and it really actually helped me sleep, but I'd forgotten about it.
Yes.
So it's really nice to have it at the bedside, just as a reminder, and going, now I
remember.
To remember.
That's what I was saying.
Techniques.
Although it's for motherhood, of course, all these principles can be, adapted to any stage of life you're at. From a work perspective, I'm, consider myself, like a mind-body expert, where I very much deal with work-life stress, and that can be from pregnancy, motherhood, obviously all the way up. All right. So, so the book actually talks about 5 modalities. We'll talk. So the breath work and the vagus nerve calming techniques, won't really go into those. They're all listed in the book, especially on the audio course. I do a little PDF so you can download it or print it, so you've got reference. So they very much support the other 3, so for every other sequence you do, you can finish up a sequence maybe with breath work, or there's 7 or 8 vagus nerve calming techniques that I give, so you can choose all those. Or maybe you're just sitting in the car and you're feeling like really flustered, or in a traffic jam running late, you can just slip into breath work, or I can, there's tools and strategies to use in all aspects of your life, so they're very much support. And then the 3, like you were mentioning, that really underpin everything. EFT tapping, emotional freedom techniques. It's where it's almost, so we've already discussed the mind-body connection, how our experiences from the stress perspective with the nervous system get stored in the body. All right. And so when we are processing our memories and emotions and thoughts and beliefs, it's very important that we go into the body to find out where we've stored them. All right. So that's why, as we've already said, the talk therapy only gets a certain level. It misses, talk therapy does here. It's very important when we're dealing with emotional and mental parts of our life, that we look at ourselves, the entire body. All right. So with the EFT tapping technique, we very much move into the body, and we look at where it's being stored, where do you sense it, where do you feel it, and we release it. It's almost like we release it by tapping certain points on the body. Each one of the points actually connects to meridian lines, but there's well over 100 clinical trials and a lot of scientific research regarding the effectiveness of EFT and actually how it works. It has a direct correlation to the amygdala, which is the reptilian, base survival part of the brain. And as I say, through all these clinical trials, it's amazing because people will be doing tapping and they're doing brain scans, so they can actually see the parts of the brain that is being affected, what's happening. And so it's really incredible to be able to, because for many years when I first qualified with EFT, I knew it worked. Not only me. Thousands of people knew it worked. But of course, the scientific community and the medical community, well, how does it work? And so, often we still need to have, which is fine, the scientific and the medical back up to prove these things. And that's fine. Yeah. And it's a good journey to go on. But we really have the proof now, amazing research being done. So although it might look weird, and you're thinking, what on earth are we doing? No, that actually, as we're moving through the tapping points, you are creating change. And it's called a setup statement. Before we start tapping, we acknowledge what we want to work with. So it's really important for our mind and our body to notice something. So this anxiety about getting back in the car for the first time after a car accident, for example. So you will be identifying what you're working with, and then you will be acknowledging how you're feeling. And then, of course, it's that identification, and then we look at acknowledgement, and then we go through to origin and where it's kept in the body. And as we do the tapping, we're clearing right from an origin, right from a body storage perspective. So that's essentially what's happening in a nutshell, very condensed version. So we can maybe do a round of tapping in a moment. The other modalities that underpin the book, Liberating Touch, also, very important mentors in my life, Ranjana and Eddie Apu, they created Liberating Touch. And that's very much from the perspective of we are in a society that is addicted to fixing. There's an issue, fix it. But often from issue to fixing, there's not a lot of awareness. It's not about giving a pill or just pretending it didn't happen or ignoring the backache or the digestive issues. Well, I'll just, it is. So very much Liberating Touch is based on not fixing. It's based on becoming the witness, the observer. And how do our beliefs, our thoughts, our emotions, our memories, how are they impacting our perspective on life? And most importantly, they give, in the book, I only do a couple of sequences, but there's an entire workbook. There's multiple. So, liberatingtouch.com, you can go onto the website and you can find out more about it. So that's the core essence of Liberating Touch is before you do any work, it's very important to connect with the true self, not the one that brings you the stories, not the one that's covered by the beliefs and the attachments and all the desires and the things that we want in this glossy society. So it very much, vagus nerve very much starts from a place of safety. Liberating Touch, very much the very first steps is always about let's connect in, let's connect in so we can then tell the body I'm listening and let's start the communication. So that's really beneficial, obviously, to do it from that perspective. And then the fifth and final one, the third one that really underpins a lot of the sequences is the Jinsen Jutsu, the Japanese healing technique. That's the one that I mentioned way back at the beginning when we started. It's a Japanese healing technique that's been around for thousands of years. So we're very much bringing ancient wisdom into modern day society. And it's not like acupuncture, but it's similar in the sense that we've got energy points on the body that then can run to the organs, so spleen flow, stomach flow, large intestine, so we've got organ connection, and it connects into the emotions of the body and all the rest. So when we have these little hiccups, like we were explaining, with our nervous system, and we have events occur to us, we can get blockages and stagnation. Sometimes we might have, organs and energy systems that are overactivated, maybe because we're in a hypervigilated anxiety state, but that might then require the reciprocal organ, because they work in pairs, to become depleted and sort of too quiet and not doing enough. So the Jinsen Jitsu is all about harmonizing, and so it's all about touching specific points on the body, so it's not verbal. So it's a lovely quiet way to access the body. It's a beautiful, I find it, although it's very quiet, I find it very empowering to note that we have the power in our fingertips to move through the body in a specific sequence that can harmonize and balance, and an enormous gift that this ancient wisdom, which was hidden in for thousands of years, has come back up, and we've got this beautiful integration of, some of the Eastern ancient wisdom in with our more traditional, way of dealing with illness and imbalance and things like that. So we've got the blend. So that's the Jinsen Jitsu. So again, you can maybe what I will do, because Jinsen Jitsu is quite tricky to spell. So maybe as part of the description, we could just put the 5 modalities that I pretty much deal with in the book. Yep. And then you can springboard off that for further research if you're interested, if you want to find out a little bit more. So maybe we can connect people to EFT websites, Liberating Touch and the Jinsen Jitsu. So if you're interested, then you can go off and explore. And then if it's right for you, and it resonates, it's beautiful. So, some of the very basic Jinsen Jitsu that I put in the book, because obviously it's too much and too long to do the full organ flows. Some of them take half hour, and you need to be able to know what they are, and it's obviously impossible to put that into the book. So there's some sort of shortcut cheat sheet ways that we can access the body.
I love them.
Yeah, love them too. Through the fingers and particularly the toes. But obviously we can access our own fingers very, very easily. So one of the basics of Jinsen Jitsu is each finger is related to different organs, different emotions. And by simply wrapping your hand around a finger and holding it for 2 to 3 minutes, we are affecting all sorts of energy pathways, as I say, the emotions and the related organs along the line. So you will hold your thumb for worry, and this is stomach, spleen, organ energy. You will be holding your index finger for fear. So any fear, anxiety, anything that kind of is a ripple effect out of fear, you can hold your index finger, and that correlates to the kidney bladder line. So that will also help balance from that organ perspective, and if you're into the energetics and sort of the meridians and things like that around the body. So that will help harmonize the balance. The middle finger is for anger and frustration. Don't think I'm being rude, but there's a real reason why we do this when we're cross with someone. What do we do?
Amazing.
Yeah, that middle finger goes up. Anger and frustration. You're going to hold this to dissipate those strong feelings, and this is connected in with the liver and the gallbladder, all the bitterness of the bile duct. People have their gallbladders removed because they're very bitter. They've held onto deep-seated, acidic, strong emotions, so that's all about balancing.
And the liver is anger. But I was
anger
thinking
and frustration.
children,
sucking their thumbs. Worried. They're obviously anxious about something.
Yeah.
So we know it.
My mum tried everything to stop me sucking my thumb. She should have got me to do this and work on my worry.
And worked on why are you feeling anxious?
I know why, but I won't go there.
But there we go. So that's what I'm saying. So it's so interesting when we learn what we just do instinctively. Kids will suck their thumb. There's something going on. So and then the ring finger is all about grief and sadness. And so that's lung and large intestine. So obviously it affects our breath, For a lot of people when they're experiencing grief, we get a lot of respiratory and breath work issues and diaphragm issues coming up. So it's all about the breath, all right, lung, and then obviously digestive issues. You know, a lot of digestive issues. Once you peel away the layers of the onion and you get to the origin of the trauma, the event, the emotion, the belief, the thought, whatever it might be, you know, then what happens? Our digestive tract is able to just breathe. Digestion of life happens in our body, like our stomach. That's what they say with stomach, you know, digestion of life.
Rest and digest.
Rest and
Instead
digest.
of fight and flight, you
Yes.
come into rest and digest. Because when you're eating on the run, you can't digest properly.
Not only that, absolutely, but also what happens if you're eating in an aroused nervous system state. You're hybrid. We've spoken about people get stuck in fight, flight for months, years, sometimes decades. You're trying to digest in a nervous system that is completely dysregulated. It's like, how are we asking the body to rest and digest and simultaneously keep us what we perceive as safe? So that's why we stay in a hypervigilant.
And
We can't.
Yeah, maybe that's why there's more allergies as well, because, you know, our stomachs are tense as we're eating, not digesting properly, going into the blood, getting more allergy, you know.
Well, it's important to remember the nervous system can only be in one state. It can either be, you know, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or, you know, so it can't be in both. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. It can't be in both fight, flight, and be in rest and digest. It doesn't work. They work like a pendulum. You can't be in both at the same time. You know, we need to be able to be in the middle. And then when it's time to rest and digest, why do you think insomnia? And I mean, you know, you can go for digestion. We talk about rest. I mean, insomnia, inability to sleep, all that, you know. So at nighttime, we should be able, or when we eat, we should be able to go into rest and digest. And then we wake up in the morning and it requires a bit more activity. We're getting ready, going to work, taking the kids to school, whatever it might be. So it requires us to be a little bit more activated and on the move. And so what happens then? Our nervous system, you know, might go a little bit this way. And then you know, we have a near car accident and then we're like, perfect. That's what it's designed to do. And then what should happen next? And after the event, we should come back to normal. And then depending on where we're at and what's happening on a day-to-day basis, we should have a nervous system that is free. It is our birthright to have a nervous system that can move like a pendulum backwards and forwards when it's required. That's why you sit, you rest after a meal, you don't rush around, you don't eat on the hop, because you cannot be sitting at your work, meeting a deadline, you're feeling anxious because it's not done and you've got to get it in half an hour. Otherwise, you know, you might lose your job or whatever it is. And you're like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming, but I'm just going to grab a sandwich or, you know, but I'm really trying to be resting and digesting. You've got to choose, my friend. The body can only be in one place. So yeah, how do we bring ourselves down, you know, so we can oscillate?
This is one
grief,
thing.
large intestine grief, and sadness.
If you have that assignment due and you need for the deadline.
Well, that would be worry. If you're worried about something or anxious about something, anxious about a job interview or something, you know, so you can be worried you're not going to meet the deadline. So I might say to you, might suggest to you, well, why don't you hold your thumb for a few minutes? That will just help balance from the worry and anxiousness, anxiety perspective. But why don't you follow up with fear? Because underlying all that, I can see that actually you're worried that, you know, managers are going to, you know, think poorly of you, or you're not going to be prepared for the presentation, and then what are the clients going to think? So maybe you could follow up with doing an index finger hold. So we're managing and balancing your worry and your anxiety around the report or the presentation, and also the fear is what happens if you don't get it right or don't get it finished. So, you know, we can go through all 5 fingers to really balance entirely.
But that's a good one to do then when you're at work.
Oh, all the time.
You just
all
okay.
the time.
I need to stop to have a break, so I can rest and digest my lunch. So just do some breathing while you're holding it before you eat. That would be good.
Beautiful.
And what's the little one?
And then the little one is what we call the efforting, which is very much society. It's the trying too hard. We are all, you know, many people are in that constant efforting, trying to get ahead at work, trying to be the best parent, trying to be the best spouse, trying to have a tidy house, trying to produce nourishing food. And it's so we find
need that one a lot.
There we go. Society, hold your little finger. So this is our efforting, and what's it connected to? Small intestine and the heart. So our hearts are disconnected. Coming back in. So all that efforting, you're having this busy day, you're coming from work, you can hold your little finger. I maybe would suggest you just place one hand over your heart, and you're just going to close your eyes, and you're just going to go into a simple breath work. When we calm the nervous system, it's extremely important that your exhale, your out breath, is twice as long as the inhale. It's how we switch off, become out of fight, flight into a more regulated state. So essentially, for example, you might decide to breathe in for the count of 4, hold for 6, exhale for 8. So that's one of the easiest ways to calm yourself down. So you're having a tough time at work, pretend you need the toilet, off you go, close the door, and what are you going to do? You can do some basic breath work. You can pick up on some of the vagus nerve things. You might decide to, you've just had the most infuriating conversation with a work colleague, and you're like, I'm feeling pretty angry. It's like, ooh,
Go to the toilet.
All the kids, young kids, teenagers. I spent many hours in my bathroom, breathing. And I was like, practice what you preach, girl. You can do this. Practice what you preach. So, it's like, these are everyday tools for everybody. So as I say, correlate to the organs, correlate to the emotions. Like you were saying, in bed, can't sleep. Well, what's going on for you? I'm worried about something coming up tomorrow or something. Well, hold your thumb.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Jinsen Jutsu, there's, as I say, it extends far beyond that, but just some basics in the book. There's also some basic holds that you can do on the body and for the baby. So that's Jinsen Jutsu in the book. Beautifully soothing for babies as well. So I think that's about it, isn't it? In terms of the techniques.
The tapping.
Oh yeah, the tapping. So in terms of a round of tapping, it doesn't really matter where you start. I'll take you through the tapping points. Some practitioners start at the top of the head. Some will start in the inner eyebrow. It doesn't matter as long as you go through all the points. So because some people start at the top of the head, some start in the inner eyebrow, you'll notice in the book, some of the sequences start here and move through, and others start at the top of the head. It doesn't matter as long as you do the full complement of the tapping. So don't get too caught up on that. Just be guided by what I've done in the book. It chops and changes. Alrighty. So, for example, what should we use as an example? Feeling anxious about giving birth.
Yep.
All right. Anxious about giving birth. So you start with I'll run you through the tapping points. So, first one, we tap right on the top of the head, the crown of the head. Then we move to the inner eyebrow. Then we move to the side of the eye. That would be the next point. Then you're going to tap under the eye, just on the little bones, so just under the pupil, under the eye. Then we're going to tap under the nose. So that would be the next point. Then we're going to tap on the chin. Then the next one, we've got the collarbone running here, and then it meets the sternum, and just underneath the collarbone there's like a little dip in there. And so just take a couple of fingers. So you're going to tap under the inner collarbone. That would be the next one that you're going to be tapping. And then the final one is under the arm. It's about this far under the armpit. Ladies, basically bra strap. You know, where the bra strap goes, it's that kind of, you know, so it's not in the armpit. Perfect, you know, kind of where the bra strap is. And so, yeah, so you can start at the top of the head and finish under the arm. Or if you choose to start at the inner eyebrow, you'll then work your way through and finish at the top of the head. It doesn't matter. As long as you do a full sequence, it does not really matter. Alrighty, so first of all, and each point you're going to tap, I don't know, 5 to 7 times each. You can just use, you know, a couple of fingers, obviously no pain, or it's just a light tap on the body. Although we say you tap 5 or 7 times and then you can move on. If you're feeling as you're moving or working through a tapping sequence, something's coming up and it's got a bit of a charge, you know, and you're noticing, oh, it's got a real resonance, then just feel free to stay, you know. You might decide to, you know, breathe and, you know, so these are guidelines as to how to do a statement, but don't move on if you're not ready, you know. Spend time, honor what's coming up for you. You know, we're so used to rushing. This is not about rushing. This is about, you know, hey body, I am listening. What have you got to tell me? And really honoring the body's wisdom. All right. So feel free to do it as you please. So for example, let's bring it back to anxiety about giving birth. So the setup statement, we state what the issue is. So I am feeling anxious about giving birth, but then we honor ourselves for having the feeling. There's no shame or guilt or, I get easily sidetracked, so hold on, I have to explain something else before we start. An emotion is energy in motion. Yep. There is no such thing as a good or a bad emotion, a positive or a negative emotion. It just is. It's just a frequency. We as humans are designed to feel the full spectrum of emotions. It's what we're designed to do. And it's a bit like we said at the beginning, it's about having an experience and then getting stuck in it. Right at the beginning when I said about the lion and gazelle, we get stuck. So what happens is you might have something occur and then you have the anger at your boss. And instead of the boss leaving your office and you technically should get back to going back to work, what's happened? The energy is no longer in motion. You have taken it in, it's stopped here, and now it's sitting in your lung. Or you're going to store it in your intestine or your liver, or I don't know where you're going to store it. But, you know, so the energy gets stuck. So it should just effectively, visually come out and dissipate. So, and it should be, an emotion is energy in motion. So don't deny yourself any emotion you're feeling, you know, especially with kids and toddlers and tantrums and things like that. They can't self-regulate. They have very big emotions, you know, and we're trying to say to them, you know, be quiet, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's just that they're in a body where the emotions got stuck because they don't have the emotional capacity to understand that, like, just because Johnny's playing with the boat and I go up and take, you know, I can't just steal it from Johnny because I want to play with it. But in their brain, that's developmentally where they are. They don't have that empathy and the connection, you know, and then we're like, you shouldn't be doing that and you should be sharing. And this kid's like, I don't actually know what's going on. All I know is that it was really strong for me, you know. And so it should just pass on through. And as we grow in emotional intelligence, maturity, you know, we should be able to allow things to pass through. So that's why in terms of the, so there is a saying in this line of work that rather than be the experience, become the witness, observe it. All right. So you're going to observe something. So you may have had a, emergency cesarean, all really frightening, all things, you know, unfolding at lightning speed, and you were, you know, just so much going on, it was difficult for you to process, and you've had no emotional help, so you're still carrying that trauma. So rather than being Annie in the hospital bed looking back, I am the emergency cesarean, I am the fear, I am the terror, I am the anxiety, I am the worry. It's like, how do you become Annie who's observing it? So it's important that you are not your experience. So the first thing that is important to do is to be able to become the witness. It's what we call, you become the observer. We buy into it. I am the, all sorts, rape victim, the car accident, the all the atrocities that go on in war and things like that. People become the soldier. I am the soldier that killed, for argument's sake. No, it's not. You were just put in the most horrific experience that your nervous system just was obliterated in its ability to try and survive what you were witnessing. So you're not, what I mean? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You become the observer of your experience. You are not that occurred to you. So that's what so for example, we say it 3 times. It's important to do it 3 times. So your setup statement, we start tapping on the side of the hand. So I feel anxious about giving birth in 4 weeks, in a month's time, let's say, about a month out. But I honor and accept how I'm feeling about this process. All right. So you're stating what the issue is, but you're also giving yourself space and grace to have the feelings. We're not trying to push them down or say that they're not warranted or they're invalid. So even though I'm feeling anxious about my impending birth, I really honor and accept how I'm feeling about this momentous occasion coming up. Even though I'm feeling anxious about my upcoming birth, I really honor and accept how I'm feeling in this moment, because these feelings are true for me. And then we start the tapping, maybe the top. Let's do the top of the head. I'm feeling anxious about giving birth. This anxiety about labor. And then you go with what comes up. So you might say, I've heard so many terrifying stories, and I'm now really fearful. This anxiety. And then tune into your body. So often when I'm working with people, I say, okay, just pause. So maybe Jen, like say if you're with a client, I'll say to you, or you can do it yourself. All right, body, where are we holding this anxiety? And somebody might say, oh, I've got a pain in my stomach. And I say, okay, this anxiety in my stomach. This anxiety in my stomach. Then I might say to you, does the anxiety have a color? And you might pause and you might go, oh, it's purple. All right, there's purple anxiety in my stomach regarding labor. This anxiety. This purple anxiety. Then I might say to you, what shape is it? And you might say, well, it's like a tight knot. So we might say, this purple knot of anxiety in my stomach. This purple knot. I've heard so many frightening stories. And I'm so anxious I won't be able to do it. You can tap either side, there's no sort of right or wrong way. I'm feeling really anxious about the experience coming up, And then we might do a few further rounds, and then we might go back to the top of the head, and then, we might do another round tapping on things, and then I'll say to you, okay, well, let's just pause. One of the most important aspects of an EFT tapping sequence, which I bypassed today because we were chatting, but I need you to realize that before you start the tapping, it's extremely important that you take a rating of intensity. So you might your client is, I'm really anxious about giving birth in a few weeks. And I'll say to you, okay, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how anxious are you? And you might say, well, I'm like 10 out of 10. I'm really wound up, And so then when you do your round of tapping, when we get to the end, I might say to you, all right, well, Jen, just take the flat palm of your hand, just do small circles on your chest, just take a couple of deep breaths, making the exhale longer. First of all, I'll say to you, so how's that purple knot of anxiety in your stomach? You might say to me, oh, it's no longer there, or it's nearly gone, or, you tune into the feedback that you're getting from your own body, And then I'll say, okay, well, let's go back. When we started, you were 10 out of 10. Just tune back into how anxious you're feeling. And you might go, oh, wow, actually, I'm feeling a lot more relaxed. I'm down to like a 1 or a 2. Or you might say to me, do you know what? I'm still sitting at like a 6 or a 7. I've still got something left in my stomach. It's not purple. It's not a knot. It feels looser, but it's still there. And then I'll say, okay, there's still something else. Off we go again. And then we might start saying this remaining knot of anxiety, and then we start to tap from there. So can you see we very respectfully and very slowly listen. We're in constant communication with the body. It's very respectful. So that's sort of a round of tapping. So make sure you take your intensity so you've got something to springboard back, because sometimes things can really clear within a round. Sometimes if something's quite large, it's called aspects. You might need to do 5 or 6. It's called tabletop technique. It's like fear of giving birth might be the table, but what are the 4 legs that are holding it up? One leg might be the stories we've heard. If this is having your second child, another leg that's underpinning that might be your previous traumatic birth experience. So you can see how we have all these events in our life that really hold up the biggie. All right. So rather than working with the anxiety, if you take 4 table legs away, what happens to the table? It collapses. All right. So it's slow, respectful, mindful work. And they are, I have no idea how many sequences, but quite a few, probably at least 30 or 40 sequences, in the book that we take you through, right from fertility, stress, pregnancy, morning sickness, preparing for birth, bringing a newborn home, the sleepless night, just everything. Am I getting it right? There's a whole chapter for dads in the book, because that's the other thing. Dads their life has also changed, and all of a sudden their best mate, their little spouse, is kind of very distracted. Understandably, a baby's a full-time job, and they get very left out, and they can feel very isolated, and often they are not brought to the table in terms of their what support do you need, how can we support you. A lot of the dads struggle tremendously with the pressure regarding financial pressure to provide, because obviously, mums, obviously either on maternity leave or maybe choosing not to go back to work. And, so we've got reduced income into the house, and it's enormous pressure. We don't even give partners or dads any recognition for, it's huge. And then they come home after a busy day. And we've had a busy day at home as a mum. Theirs is a different stress. They come straight into bath time. It's all crying. And that we used to call it suicide hour, like witching hour. And they come in from work, and it's just like, oh my God, I just need a breath like I used to be able to do before I had kids. But you're full on in, and you're into that supportive role. And so I want to also take a moment. We've very much spoken about mums and, but very much, to the, partners and the dads, a huge shout out. You also need the support and the nurturance. And so there is a chapter in there for you too.
Yeah, and I like the little journal, and you had a journal for your
I think there's 9 or 10 journals, one specifically for the dad, for them to get in touch with their emotions. All these techniques are absolutely applicable, and all 5 modalities. So, and I think it's something nice you can do together. Go through and learn these together, and maybe do some tapping together. There's couples journals, there's sequences to do together, and
yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
it's a good place to finish up.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's been fun. I've enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you. I've learnt a lot and really enjoyed it. Enjoyed reading the book. I think this is going to be a really great baby shower present.
Yes. Get ordering. The mamas to be needed.
Yes.
Yes.
I reckon
so that's the book.
Well worth it for the baby shower.
It's really strange to see it in print. If you've ever written a book, it's just such a process, to get it here. So, yes, I've literally birthed it, and it's out there in the world now.
Yes. Thank you.
No, thank you, Jen. Thank you.